I think one other thing is everyone needs help. Like,
Yeah,
regardless of how
yeah,
many times you've done it before. And we've spoken to entrepreneurs who are on their fifth, sixth business, and we've spoken to people who are just about to start their first business. And they both need support. They both need help. They both feel like it's always great to have someone to bounce
yeah,
ideas from, to help
yeah.
structure the way that you think and to help work out how to execute in the best possible way.
Right, we're on. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
I'm very good. Yeah, very good. Nice to be in the safety of my own home rather than
Yes.
share some space where we're trying to wrestle with microphones and cameras, but all
Yeah,
good.
yeah. It takes a.
Yeah,
It's a lot easier to set up, isn't it, when you just literally plug and play at home.
it is. Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm all right, thanks very much. Yeah, really, really good. So, episode 3 of Unicorns and Workhorses, eh? Exciting.
Uh, I think a good chance to be a bit more retrospective, maybe a bit more introspective. Is that the word? What's the right word? But anyway, focusing on us rather than speaking to other people. As fun as it is, I think it's a good
Yeah.
chance for us to kind of, I guess, talk about where we are so far.
So, yeah, retro and intro to episode 3. So, shall we dive straight in then and go to kind of where Trove's at now? You give us the high level summary then, Chris.
We both worked together at Mina, business that I was a founder of, along with Ashley Tate and Andy Gunn. And we sold that business, and my earnout period ended in February, end of February this year. Maybe there's maybe there's a subject matter for another podcast to talk about earnout periods and how to best prepare yourself for those. So I finished this year. You'd finished about 6 months before, and had
Yeah.
already started doing Trove stuff.
Yeah.
And I think for me, in terms of what's next, there's definitely a draw to this idea of working with early stage founders, especially people right at the beginning of the journey. So I guess long story short, we've been working together on Trove now for the last few weeks or so.
Few
And
months
we're
actually, Chris. I mean, I know it's
months.
flown by,
Oh,
but yeah, it really is a
it
couple of
has.
months.
What we're in May, yeah. And I think it's been a really good process. I've really enjoyed it. It's fascinating to work with so many different businesses. It is also fascinating to see the parallels between a lot of them. And there's so many of them are in a similar place with similar challenges. It's been great for me personally to get back into the startup ecosystem, especially in Sheffield, but also in Leeds and further afield. And I feel like we're in a good place. I think that sometimes it takes you're waiting for the momentum to build a little, aren't you? Always with this kind of stuff, but it definitely feels like we're in that place where the momentum is really building, and there's so much possibility, there's so much potential in the near future. Um, and I guess us finding how we're working together as well, because although we've worked together a lot and known each other for a very long time, um, this is the first time we've done anything like this together as
Yeah,
we've kind
yeah,
of founded something together. So
yeah.
that's been great as well. I've enjoyed the variety. I'm in danger of taking on too much as always, but at the moment I'm pretty happy with everything I'm doing. So
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think that dynamic's really interesting. Kind of working. I mean, what was really fascinating, go back, 4 or 5 years at Mina was I was reporting into you. Well, or not to start with, but ultimately I was reporting into you, and we were really conscious of that at the time of going, well, is this going to work or not? And you know what? I actually loved it. You were a great boss. Thanks very much. But I saw you in a completely different light to how I'd known you for so many years. And
yes,
that was quite an enjoyable process. And actually, for me, that made it really a bit of a no-brainer that you would, kind of be the yin to my yang within Trove, because of I felt we worked really, really well together and complemented each other.
yeah. And interestingly, I was having a conversation with Ashley Tate, for those who don't know, who's co-founder at Mina, and and me and him talk a fair amount about business and stuff, and we've been talking about why startups fail, and it's increasingly obvious that getting that founding team right is just essential, and having the right dynamic, and not that it has to be some kind of magical combination of the right people that only happens kind of one in a million. It's not, it's less about that. It's more about the healthy behaviors you demonstrate as co-founders, the fact you're open and honest with each other, you talk to each other a lot, you have shared ambition in terms of what you want the business to do, and you're constantly kind of coming back to each other and reiterating, you know, are we on track? Is this what you want it to be? Are you doing the things you want to do? Or am I doing the things I want to do? And having those conversations, because I think that is why a lot of startups fail, is because the founders end up, the team doesn't work together after a certain point.
Yeah, and that bleeds out into everything else, doesn't it? You know, if you've got a solid, you know, founding team who are constantly having those conversations, like you say, and you present that united front, then that it gives the rest of the business confidence and the investors confidence as well that you're moving in the right direction. So, I mean, fortunately, you know, talking a lot is something that we both find kind of fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's not been an issue.
But what have you found surprising that shifted since you started working at Trove?
What have I found surprising? So, what I suppose, I don't know if this necessarily answers the question, but one of the things I've started to do is this idea of trying to codify what we did. So, you know, you go through the process of building a business and it's successful, and you know, you grow it and you sell it, and I feel like there were lots of elements of that business that especially the people working for us really loved, and lots of people said it was the best place they've ever worked. And we certainly, you know, the results speak for themselves. We went from 0 to 43 people in about
43 in the end.
43, something like that, I think, and in less than 3 years, raised over 6 million quid, exited for a good amount above that, a good positive exit. So we obviously did some stuff right. I think a lot of those things that we did have always kind of, part of it, you go through it with gut instinct as you do it. And so the exercise for me now, and I'm kind of getting this clearer in my head now, is I need to sit and codify everything that we did, or the kind of the important structural elements of what we did. So I'm surprised by how much I've enjoyed that process of actually kind of building that together. I'm surprised by how much I've forgotten. I mean, it's crazy. Like, and we had a conversation just before this where I was like, I can't quite remember what that guy did for us. I know he was important, but I can't remember what he did. And because everything moves so quickly, you forget the detail. So through Trove and through doing some kind of speaking slots and other things, I'm going through the process of trying to learn the lessons again and put them down on paper, and they really resonate well with people. I think that's probably one of the real joys, is you sit in front of someone in a room and tell them about those experiences and what you did, and see the reaction, whether that's kind of an individual basis or with a big group of people. And so it's good validation, right, that there's value there in our experiences and in helping others to do the same. I think one other thing is everyone needs help. Like, you know, regardless of how many times you've done it before. And we've spoken to entrepreneurs who are on their 5th, 6th business, and we've spoken to people who are just about to start their first business, and they both need support. They both need help. They both feel like, you know, it's always great to have someone to bounce ideas from, to help structure the way that you think, and to help work out how to execute in the best possible way. So that's been really great validation, because part of it, you know, imposter syndrome, you're like, oh, can I offer anything? But we've had some really good sessions with people over the last few weeks that just shows there's value in what we want to offer.
That piece that you did on LinkedIn the other day about you know, the door code and the smurl counter. I mean, you were desperate to get that smurl. You know, I remember you were so desperate to get that smurl. You were so happy when you find it. How much was it? It was like 400 quid or something.
Yeah, but it took me 3 months to justify spending
Yeah,
400 quid on a counter for the office, you know.
yeah.
And I wish I knew. I wish I'd just bit the bullet straight away. But yeah,
And it was only you holding yourself back from not doing
mm,
it. But actually, what it ended up doing was just so clear. And then all of those lessons that we had, sort of took from there, actually, they are so valuable in that real world context with the people in there. So I think you have to remind yourself of that sometimes. And certainly, trying to do what we're doing now, sometimes you put stuff out there. And I've been totally guilty of this in the last couple of weeks. You throw stuff out there and go, oh, that didn't get very many impressions, or that didn't,
yeah,
nobody responded to that. And yet, somewhere, I met a lady this morning, and she said, "Oh, I read your post about this," and I was like, "Oh, you did?" I was like, "Oh, right, fantastic." But maybe that didn't sort of show up within the social media metrics. And I think it's a funny place. You have to be on social media to grow your presence, but actually, it can be a bit challenging to until you've
yeah.
got 200,000 followers or whatever it ends up being.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people at LinkedIn are not stupid, and so the algorithm works by people posting regularly and engaging regularly, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
and obviously having more people engaging means people come back, so it kind of
yeah,
feeds the beast, right? But
yeah, yeah.
and I don't think it's kind of second nature to either of us to be that
No,
prolific on social media.
no, no.
So I think I do feel that that is challenging to me, having to kind of go through that process. But again, I suppose what I'm trying to do with it is just talk about the lessons and use it as okay, I've got half an hour now to write something. Let's pick something that recently came up in conversation, or let's pick something that I just put into a presentation that I've done recently and talk about that, and kind of bring those lessons out, because it's also good feedback, right,
It
from
is.
people. They
Yeah,
go, oh yeah, that's interesting.
yeah.
And we
Or
should
it's
probably
not.
or it's not. Yeah, it's nothing. It's just complete silence. And we should probably say the smell counter, like the story of that is, and I know I'm going to get bored of saying this story, but I am already, but people do appreciate it, is that it's like the counter that you have in the cafe that shows the Instagram followers, right? Like you quite often see them, and their actual tickers are like old train departure boards. And we got one of those, and you can plug an API into the back of it. And so we plugged the API in for the driver number, which was our kind of North Star metric within Mina. And so everyone could see whenever a driver was added, which is lovely, because you get this buzz within the office of people seeing the growth, literally seeing the growth of the business. But the other thing that we did, and I don't know who came up with this, and I'm going to assume it was, I was going to assume it was me.
That was me.
I'm
I
going to
came
assume
I
it's
came up
you.
with that because I remember you putting it up there. Because I remember putting the door code up there, and I was like, we had a target of 2017. I'm pretty sure they've changed the door code
Yes,
since then, but it was 2017 to
I
hit by
hope so.
Christmas.
I hope so, because otherwise, Unit 10, One Burton Road, that's how you get into the office.
But it's 2017, and I was like, let's put it on the door code. You were like, that's a
Yes.
great idea. And we were like, oh, that combination of smell counter and that, because we were at 1,000 or something like that. We'd hit the 1,000 in the summer,
Yes.
and it was like, right, we've got to double that number by Christmas. We're like, that's a big ask. Shit, how are we going to do it? Put it on the door code, and you were like, yes.
And so what then, and that on its own is great. And everyone who walks in the building knows the target, knows the
Yeah,
target number.
yeah,
But more than that, what ends up happening then is, because everyone is kind of really bought into the idea of this simple number that all of us together can make progress towards, then you have kind of mini parties. You do get the
yeah,
bubbly out when you
yeah,
hit 1,000 or 5,000 or
yeah,
10,000,
yeah,
and you are kind of literally in the room, everyone together, or people are on webcams, dialed in, kind of waiting for this number to happen. And then it's
yeah,
like, yeah, we hit it. And then you have
yeah,
that little celebration, and then you go, right,
yeah.
the next number is this. Let's
Next,
kind of
yeah,
keep going.
yeah,
So
yeah.
as a cultural thing, as a kind of way of motivating and aligning people, it was brilliant.
It was really, really good. So moving on to what we're doing now a little bit more then. So what are kind of some of the themes that you've noticed, or the stories that you've picked up on from some of the founders or the clients that we've been working with recently?
There's a lot. There's a lot of similarities, like I said, regardless of stage of business that people are in. But I think the thing that people like that tend to have is a lot of ideas, a huge
Yeah,
amount of energy and drive, a
yeah,
big ambition. They want to kind of shoot for the stars, but maybe they're not the integrators. Maybe they're not the people who kind of actually have to go and execute, or necessarily know how to go from this intangible kind of big idea into kind of how do you execute. Um,
is
so
that what that's what just to clarify what you mean by an integrator is somebody who takes the ideas and translates them into reality? Yeah.
translates them into reality, yeah, yeah. And I think like your typical big idea entrepreneur is capable of doing that with some
Mm.
with some support, but I think what doesn't come naturally is the idea of taking the big thing and working out what the first few steps are. I think often they're very good while you're progressing at kind of saying, well, this is where I am now, and I'm going to repainting what that kind of direction is. I think they're very good at that while you're doing it, but it's the kind of what's the next step, what's the day to day, what do you need to do to validate. Really enjoyed how effective we can be with people at doing that, and but that's a pretty universal problem. I think that's what's
Yeah.
been quite interesting is that
Yeah.
so many people we've spoken to are in exactly the same place, whether they have done it before or whether they're in a day job and they've had an idea for a few years and don't know how to start, or we spoke to someone with a successful agency who kind of has growing pains, doesn't know where to bring in employee number one, or use a contractors to deliver, or how does he
Mm.
grow, or does he need to grow, even does he
Yeah.
just stay where
Yeah.
he is. But there's also similarities in terms of people needing investment, and look, we were in exactly the same place, and we knew that to progress Mina as a business at a certain point we had to go and get angel investment, but almost feeling like that investment is the only thing that's going to unblock their progress. And so almost not making progress because of, well, I can't go any further because I need
Yeah.
money, because I need an
Yeah.
angel to come in and give me £200,000. Um, and I think there is always a point with businesses where that is true. I can't go any further until I hire someone, or I can't go any further until I can get some money to actually build a prototype, or to do this research, or to do, even travel to this event, or do these kind of things. I think that's completely valid. But I think there's a danger that a lot of people say, well, if only I had investment, then this business would be a success. And I don't think that's ever an answer, because if you're in a place where you have an idea and you're progressing it, and you think it's got legs, and you think it could be a brilliant business, you have to invest yourself, whether that is time or money or whatever. I don't think you can hold back and then go in front of an angel and say, can I have £150,000, please? Because then I'll go ahead and try and
Yeah.
push this. You need to
Yeah.
exhaust every available opportunity, every available avenue
Yeah.
before you get to that point. Because the,
Yeah.
the other thing is, if you walk in front of an angel or a group of angels and say, yeah, I need this money, great, fine, and this is the product and the validation, so the valuation, um, and they say to you, well, have you launched it? Have you built it? Have you done this? Have you done that? If your answer to some of those logical validation questions is, oh no, I haven't done that yet, you're either going to not get investment, or you're going to get terrible valuation, because they're going to say, well, you're pre-traction, so this
Yeah.
is a big risk for me to invest in you
Yeah.
as a business. So I suppose kind of being kind, it would be just helping people to realize that validation is so important,
Mm.
and you have to kind of really exhaust every opportunity before you're able to turn around to someone and say, please invest in my business.
Yeah.
Because it's just you end up kind of cutting it off your nose to spite your face if you're not careful, and just going into a process where people will go, well, it's too risky, so I won't validate, I won't invest. So
Taking experience back at Mina, okay, yes, we ended up having quite a decent chunk of marketing budget, but that was in like year 3. Year 1 and year 2 was just literally whatever we could do for free to get in front of people. Ash was
yes,
always on LinkedIn, go and appear at every show, but don't pay for a slot. Just turn up there and start giving stuff out and talking to everybody. Answer questions, be in front of as many possible different angles, talk on LinkedIn, all of that stuff. That didn't cost a penny, and that's what you've got to do, because otherwise,
yeah, Yeah, you have, and it's difficult at the beginning because it would be a lot easier if you could just quit your job and someone pay you to go and progress this idea. But it's just not the reality of starting a business. People don't write checks, large checks for people just to kind of go and start things without some kind of validation that they're on the right track. A good you made me think of a good example actually in terms of a thing that is free and can get you some traction is trade press. So if you go out
Yeah,
to trade publications, um, my experience of trade press is that often they are desperate for things to write about, right? Like if you work for a trade publication that's kind
yeah,
of Tires Weekly or
yeah,
some kind of random industry kind of publication, there's only so much every week that you can write about, and because they're websites, they need to continually publish stuff every day. If you can get a good website and go to some trade shows and go and get some, take some photos of something or have some kind of event or some kind of announcement and make some friends with some journalists. And then you can continually give these positive messages about your startup. And that helps your validation no end. And when investors are looking at who to invest in, if they then see that you've already got some press coverage and you're already known in an industry, that is far better than not
yeah,
being known, being
yeah,
completely unknown in that space.
yeah,
And that's the kind of thing we did a lot of.
yeah, yeah.
We had brilliant coverage in like Fleet World, Fleet
Yes,
News, some
yeah, yeah,
EV publications,
yeah,
because what we were doing really aligned with what they wanted to talk about, and so we made sure that we had something to talk about
yeah,
with them fairly regularly.
yeah,
But you don't need £100,000 to do that. You just need some news or something to talk about, or a survey that you've just gone
yeah.
out with and got some
Survey's a
interesting
great
data
one.
out,
Yeah,
or a white paper, or
yeah,
there's
yeah.
tons of examples there, and those are the things that I want to see people
Mm.
doing if they're looking for angel investment. I want them to have kind of gone out and pushed a little bit to get that kind of coverage.
Yeah, I mean, I always go back with my career in the wine trade and hospitality. It was sort of the idea of that startup truck, but people would often go the kind of journey to becoming a chef would be I'm going to set up a supper club, then I'm going to get
Yes.
myself a market stand at the weekend, and literally, a cheap camp stove and a wok, and if you can
Yeah.
cook, you can feed a lot of people, and then you go and get yourself, you make a bit of money, then you buy yourself a little trailer to tow on the back of your estate car, and before
Mm.
you know it, you've got this sort of traction, you've built the brand, and da 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 da, and there's so many
It's
examples
a
of
it's
that.
a brilliant analogy that because I think so many people end up thinking, well, I'm going to open a restaurant, so I need some investment so I can open a restaurant in the next month. It's like, no, you can start small and you can
Yeah.
build and build and build.
And I think the irony there is that because the restaurant's so expensive, that people go, well, I can't do that because no one's going to give me 3 million quid to open a
Yes.
restaurant up. So I'm going to have to go this way. So it forces people down the small route path. And what you end up doing is it gets rid of it. Okay, well, I'm going to make, I don't know, pancakes, for example, but your pancakes are a bit crap. You're going to get immediate, and it's immediate
Yeah.
feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Here's try my pancakes. Well, those are shit, mate. Okay, haven't got a business.
Yeah.
Try my
Exactly.
pancakes. Oh my god, that's the best pancake I've ever had.
Yeah.
Next,
Then you've got
it's
validation.
yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
really have, you really have. So
It's a
anyway,
LinkedIn post right there.
it is indeed. I think I did started to write one like that, but kind of got sidetracked onto something else.
The
Anyway,
pancake theory of starting a business.
the pancake theory. I like it. I like it. I'm making notes of this right now. The thing that I'm finding fascinating is that neither of us are visionaries, right? Neither of us are the visionary entrepreneur. I mean, and I found that flip of okay, running or building a business without somebody in that visionary space is quite hard. you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
because it's like you said, doesn't come naturally to either of us going out there and being on LinkedIn. I'll quite happily and stand up in front of 1,000 people, 2,000 people and talk to them, but I feel like social media is a different thing, and putting myself out there in that context feels different, even though it's not.
Because I think that vision sustains you, doesn't it? You know, the confidence in that longer term vision is like that's the thing that often will drive you along. Whereas I think both of us can be guilty of kind of looking at the short term opportunities. Oh, we'll hop there
Yeah,
because there's something I'll hop there,
yeah,
and we need to both make sure we don't lose sight of the bigger vision as to
yeah,
where we want this to go.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I definitely agree with that. But that's also kind of the fun of working with the visionaries in a different capacity, like helping them and supporting them as you get to be around those kind of characters, which I think is always really good.
yeah. It does, and it rubs off, doesn't it? Like they always say, if you want to, you know, be somebody, or do something, hang around with the people that you respect and admire. You want to be a wealthy person, hang around with wealthy people. You want to be, a sports player, don't go and hang around the chip shop. It's not going to work. So surround yourself with the people that you want to emulate, and it really, really helps.
Oh, so one more thing, I guess, that I found interesting or surprising, and we had a bit of a conversation about this earlier with someone, but the but the strength of the ecosystem in Sheffield around startups.
Yes.
The more I'm in there, the more I see it, the stronger it looks. I
Yeah.
mean, it is. There's a lot of good things happening in Sheffield as a city and in South Yorkshire, actually, because I think of the combined mayoral authority and a lot of kind of push there. You've got venture community, Peter Hopton stuff. You've got Sheffield Angels just started, which I'm part of, which is Ashley Tate and Andy Evans, who kind of running a lot of that. I mean, just being down at the tech parks, I'm an entrepreneur in residence down there, and seeing how much stuff is happening through there. Harry Neville doing kind of
absolute force of nature.
Yeah. I was thinking about all of the things. I mean, he does so much, but there's a Sheffield startup meeting in particular, which is so good. We went to Tech South Yorkshire a few weeks ago in Doncaster.
Yeah, that was great.
That was good. Yeah, Tracy at Tech SY. Like, there's so much stuff happening. Innovation Spine, Charlotte doing the Innovation Spine work. And I think it is paying off. I should have kind of found the actual number, but I believe last year Sheffield got more investment in startups by sub-magnitude than Leeds, for example.
I know. So we've had a couple of conversations with, some American investors, haven't we? And there's a fairly big difference. Risk appetite is quite different often, where what happens in Britain is typically, the ones that kind of make it through build something that's actually quite profitable quite early. And in America, their expectation is, well, you shouldn't be profitable for 5 years. You should be.
Why would you be profitable?
Why would you be profitable? And it's like
very different mentality. Yeah, and I think part of that is the availability of finance and funding, right? That's a slightly different approach. But it is very different. I do have a really fundamental belief that one of the things that generally can help the country is by more people starting businesses and more people being employed, and whether they are fast growing startups, whether they are more lifestyle businesses, whether they're social enterprises, and I'm involved in Sheffield Social Enterprise Network. But I think kind of the creation of jobs, the creation of good jobs that are kind of needed locally and are skilled and help people to grow. I just think is one of the best things that we can do to kind of generally help the country as a whole, is to kind of keep growing and keep building great businesses. And that's part of the reason for wanting to do this, to play a very small part in making that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more things devolve as they are, with the internet and AI and everything like that, kind of small businesses have such an opportunity to have such an oversized impact. It's not like it was 15, 20 years ago where, scale meant you'd be successful. Small businesses really struggled. It's the opposite. The efficiency gains that you've got with AI are just incredible. Small businesses can create something quite remarkable and quite sizable as well without lots of resources. What kind of trends are you seeing in tech and business that that are really pushing the boundaries, pushing the envelope?
So that's a big question. I mean, the obvious one is AI, right? And I think I'm just constantly learning about the capability of it and what it can do. And that feels like something where, you have to be so careful about it not just kind of passing you by and going way, way beyond kind of your own understanding, because the pace of change is so huge. And obviously, when you're talking about starting new businesses, it's going to have this outsized impact on that. And I think there is a trend at the moment as to, I guess, in the same way as kind of 25, 30 years ago, the internet, people just looking for ways that the internet can disrupt a legacy kind of industry. We're in that place with AI right now, and everyone's saying, okay, well, if AI can do this, how can it disrupt property? How can it disrupt law? How can it disrupt e-commerce? How can it disrupt coaching, mentoring, all these things? So I'm intrigued as to what falls out of that that's concrete, because a lot of the stuff I've seen so far has been interesting niche executions, but that don't necessarily have loads of traction or loads of growth. It's not really obvious how to monetize them. And I think that will change. I've heard quite a few people talk about Lovable, the last couple of weeks, yourself included, and the power of that. And again, I guess how much of that ends up being, in the early 2000s or maybe later, where everyone could suddenly build a website and, say they did, and there was a lot of crap out there and there was some good stuff out there. Like, are we in the same place? But it's one of those areas that I want to kind of sit and research. I think so. Our one of the ways in which our brains work slightly differently is you kind of go out there and look for this knowledge everywhere, and you listen to podcasts a lot, and you read and you listen to audiobooks, and you're constantly kind of filtering new stuff as you see it. Whereas I'm a bit more, what am I? Slow
reflective.
Yes, maybe reflective is a kind of word. But even I can see the value of what's coming. It's just as with everything, it's the execution. One of the really good ones that I've been thinking about a lot is this idea of first-time founders being kind of really focused on product, and second, third, fourth-time founders being obsessed with distribution, and the distribution channel being the most important thing. So I've been thinking a lot about that and how that applies to the people we're advising at the moment, because it certainly does. And just how distribution changes, how distribution channels can be your moat, and they can be so important to your competitive advantage as well. So that's been really interesting.
Give us an example of that then.
Oh, okay. So, what can I give that isn't something that I'm speaking to someone about already? If we let's take the EV world. If we look at Mina as an example, right?
Yeah.
So, Mina, for those who don't know, EV charging software as a service business, and basically the really unique part of the problem that was solved was home charging. But if you take, for example, the public charging aspect of that, so you have a card that allows you to roam in public, you can charge on lots of different charge points. That as a product itself is interesting, right? You can use one card and it allows you to charge on lots of different networks. And as a product, it's a good product, but it's also one that can be copied reasonably easily. There's a few agreements that have to be put in place, but technically it's not the most complicated thing in the world to solve. How you kind of get that into people's hands, though, is a completely different matter. You could try and sell those cars to individuals with EVs and get them to pay a monthly fee, and it's a useful product for them because they don't have to download loads of apps and those kind of things. But what if you could get a fleet of 5,000 vehicles to sign up for that, and it's one sale, and you're not having to win individual customers, you're winning a fleet? Or what if you could get a car manufacturer to kind of sign up for that as a branded white labeled service, and for every electric vehicle they sell, there's a branded card in the glove box? that's what I mean in terms of the product is the same, but the distribution, how you actually
Yeah.
get it into people's hands
Yeah.
is very, very different. And so very quickly, your what you end up doing to grow that business becomes about partnerships more than it is about the product.
But it's also the story that you're telling with that distribution channel. Because the story that you tell an end consumer who's buying an EV to get the car is very different to the story that you're telling to a fleet manager who is
Yeah.
purchasing 5,000, isn't it? Right? It's the same
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
but it's a different story and it's a
And
different way of achieving that same goal.
and probably it solves a different problem, you know. And I'd encourage anyone with an idea to go through the personas of
Yes.
who is it that they're solving these problems for. And so you know, the difference between selling a product to a consumer, versus selling it to a FTSE 100 corporate, well, they're going to want to know about ISO compliance in a way that the consumer doesn't really care about.
Yeah.
So the decisions you make when you grow your business become very different based on the distribution channel.
Yeah.
And I think with Mina, we thought about the distribution channel, but we thought about the product first. And then but the distribution channel evolved over time.
Yes.
By the end of it, most of what we cared about was how we
distribution.
get this into get the distribution out there.
Yeah.
Whereas I think if you're a second, third time founder, you think about that distribution on day one, and it affects your decisions. It impacts the decision making process when you're starting. How about you? What are you seeing at the moment you're finding interesting?
Yeah, so I mean, AI, obviously, you know, to echo your point, you can't get away from it. And, you know, we're using it a fair amount, maybe not to, you know, its fullest extent at the moment, but I utilized it for a research topic the other day, and that was just amazing. You know, the amount of noise it filtered out. If you get that prompt really tight, you know, that was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's the in-depth research thing, isn't it, on ChatGPT?
Yeah, deep research or whatever it's called.
That's
yeah,
the one.
So good. So yeah, I mean that's obviously a thing. I think, you know, we touched on it before, that kind of asynchronous team design, you know, where you've got people who are working in multiple time zones and stuff like that. And I think that's certainly relevant for, you know, scale ups and the bigger businesses. You know, and we had that to a fair degree with Corpay, where you're kind of like crossing between America and UK, and, you know, you're working in different time zones. And I think how that's handled is really interesting, and how like technology is being utilized so that you're not having to have so many meetings all the time, so that you can create documentation, you know, using, you know, products like Notion or Loom or, you know, video recording. I think that's really fascinating. And we were doing, without thinking necessarily about it, you know, we were using Loom, you know, 3 or 4 years ago. I was using Loom as a sales outreach for people, you know, record a video and send it to them. And funny enough, we've started doing that on a friends group chat, haven't we? You know, where we actually record like a minute video, a little update, because actually that barrier is so much less. Like sometimes like, no one uses voicemail anymore, which is weird, partly because people don't make phone calls anymore. But anyway, but, you know, a text doesn't always convey what you want, whereas a minute video record, you can get a huge amount across. I find that amazing, which is the irony of it, because I find that difficult posting on social media. But, you know, there you go. Probably because we weren't brought up with social media, I think, is the how old were we when Facebook was launched? 20s, mid-20s. So, you know, we are definitely not the generation of, you know, social media. But anyway, what else? I mean, I think the other thing, and the more I think about it and the more I read and listen and watch, is the power of that personal brand. You know, there was a business I was talking to earlier on today, and, you know, they've got a great business brand, you know, really good product and all of that stuff, but there was I didn't understand the story behind it. I didn't, you know, it's just a product. And I'm like, I always have bought on value alignment a lot of the time. You know, I will buy products from, you know, companies I admire because they're doing the right things, and their voice and their social presence and their environmental impact and all of that kind of stuff. And yes, that's a business identity and a brand identity, but increasingly you've got to have that personal brand behind things, you know. And there's lots of people who talk about the power of personal brand, but, you know, if you just look at the one of my favorite brands, Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard, that he's not like a, celebrity CEO or anything like that. But if you go and look at his story, and there's a book I always recommend to people, Let My People Go Surfing, how they built Patagonia and how it's, everything they do is all built around his fundamental principles of, really being a dirtbag climber back in the 60s and 70s. The business has grown around that, and I think it's so powerful, and it's increasingly more powerful. And partly as you get that removal, from the day to day with AI and technology and all of that stuff, people want to connect with people still, and you're never going to get rid of that.
No.
I mean, I've used some really interesting things like Bordy, I think is fascinating. And actually, I find the conversation, really engaging with it and really useful. But it's always for me, and maybe this will change, but it's always, I know it's an AI, and so therefore I utilize it for certain things, but I don't get the same that I get from talking to a person. And I mean, maybe it'll change, but I don't know. I think it's going to be hard.
I think so. I think we like the stories, right? We do. We like to buy into people's stories. I think that's that's the case when people are investing as well, right? That
Yeah, 100%.
it's about the kind of the team as much as it is anything else. And I do think you can go a long way in terms of the visibility of your brand and your business by putting yourself out there, but with authority, but also authority and authenticity, and
Yeah,
talking about the right things. And
yeah,
again, I had a mini rant to you before this call about the idea of I have to be careful with my words here, but the idea of kind of people starting businesses, and the main thing they talk about online is starting a business. And I think, in danger of kind of myself being in that number, right? But I think there's a reason in which we talk about online starting a business is because our service, our offering, is to help people do the same, right? But if you're starting a business that is selling widgets, then by all means you should be out there with your brand, but your brand should shout about your authority in
yeah,
widgets, and
yeah,
how you buy them, how you sell them, and
yeah,
yes, talk about your journey, but focus on your startup.
yeah,
Don't
yeah,
don't don't talk about your journey. Once you're done,
yeah,
fine. That's the point where you can
yeah,
go, right, here's some tales to tell, in
yeah,
terms of how I did and how I got on with
yeah,
stuff. But
yeah.
a bugbear of mine is yeah, entrepreneurs, while they're doing it, talking about how other people can be entrepreneurs. Don't talk about that. Talk about the business you're building and how great it is and how you solve a problem that no one else does.
Yeah, because surely you'd be distracted from actually
Yeah.
building the
Yeah.
business that you want to be making successful, right?
And look, as an angel investor, I want them to focus 110% on spending that money in the best way. Spend that money to grow the business.
No, I think it's a really interesting point, and and it's there's the cult of celebrity, isn't there? And
Yes.
it's easy to get sucked into that. And I'm really conscious of sometimes putting posts out there. It's an experiment to see what works and see what doesn't. But then I'm also looking at it, going, "Oh, do I just sound like a tit writing this stuff?"
And I think yeah, you got to be authentic, right? You got to believe, and I think you're all good.
Why don't we just talk about what we're going to do next with the
Yeah.
podcast? So we've got Andy Gunn coming up in a week or so's time.
Yes, we have. We finally managed to book that in. So Andy was our technical co-founder at Mina. I might start that podcast with the disc profile of the three of us as
Yes.
founders, so you can understand where the three of us are. But thinks very differently to me
Yeah.
and to Ash. The three of us
Yeah.
are quite good in that respect. There's a lot of kind of technical people that I've worked with and spoken to over the last however many years who have ambitions to go beyond just being the technical person and go broader. And Andy's very much done that. So that'll be, I think that'll be insightful.
So we've got episode number 4 coming out with Andy soon. We've got a newsletter coming out soon. You can find us both on LinkedIn, website, blah, 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 all of those lovely places. Amazing. Oh, and you're on the Venture Community podcast as well, I think.
Yes, I don't know if it's come out yet, but I went and chatted to Peter and James about that, and about some of the meaner stuff.
Brilliant. Amazing. Right. Better let you go and pick up the kids then.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very good. Right.
Good to talk to you, mate.
Speak soon.